Dean in California, pronouns are he, him, says science does not require methodological naturalism. So welcome, Dean.
How you doing, Dean?
Hello. Yeah. Science, that's my current assertion. Science does not require methodological naturalism. And my sort of understanding, is that methodological naturalism is the operational assumption by scientists that in order to perform science, you need to make it up. You need to assume metaphysical naturalism, right?
No.
No.
I was going to completely stop talking, Dean. I was going to completely just let Jmike go in on this. Before the call, I specifically had the caller go back and ask if you meant that science does not require philosophical naturalism or methodological naturalism. And you said methodological naturalism. And now in your description, what you just stated is that science must assume philosophical naturalism. And no, it doesn't. Neither of us believe that. So I'm going to guess that you just don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask, could you
okay.
So that way, because I want to make sure that I understand what your point is when you invoke these distinctions. What is the relevant distinction between methodological naturalism and philosophical naturalism? Or what is your understanding? That way we don't talk past each other.
That is not usually something that my own epistemology requires. I don't think the distinction is essential in my epistemology, but other.
Okay, so the answer is that you don't know the distinction, correct?
I know. I think I could give a rote description. The metaphysical thing, the metaphysical naturalism is more of an ontological claim, while methodological naturalism is more of an operational way in order to conduct a certain process, or in order to do something productive, to perform scientific research, you need to make certain assumptions about how the world works, and that's
okay. And so when you called in initially saying that doesn't require naturalism, and we inquired for a distinction. We inquired for a distinction between the two, and then you weaved in from methodological naturalism into having to assume ontological naturalism or philosophical naturalism, metaphysical naturalism, whichever term you want to use interchangeably. You went to that leap, but if you know the distinction, you would know that distinction is predicated on that type of that analysis being distinct, right? There are people that take philosophical naturalism to be true, who are you could call them hard naturalists, right? That don't think that supernatural has any say in any type of domain in ontology, right? Now, when we use if we're using it from a methodological standpoint, where does that entail that person must be an ontological naturalist or a metaphysical naturalist? Where does that entail?
Well, it doesn't necessarily. The biggest question, it doesn't necessarily assume a certain ontology if you're conducting science. Although I don't know. It just seems like that distinction is kind of if you assume a certain thing, that doesn't necessarily mean that you believe it, but I don't know to what sort of extent assuming means that you take personal credence into something. Well, if you're saying
can I go in the world and find worldly facts, discover how the behaviors of things are, right, and describe how they might work, generate predictions, falsify them, verify them, things like that. Could I do that without having to say that could I still simultaneously say, I just don't know if there's something supernatural, or I don't know that there's a God? Could I still usefully use that method?
You could, yes. My point is that you could go out in the world and.
So I guess I'm not really seeing I'm not really seeing the problem you're saying, because is your claim that it doesn't require it? So I'm not really sure what you're even saying requires, because I don't know what your distinction is.
So if you're saying that you want to formulate hypothesis and make evidence, you don't need to have any notion of you don't need to have any sort of ontological vision or any opinion about naturalism. So therefore, naturalism is extraneous to science.
Look, I don't have to know that I'm not a brain in a vat right now to know that I can make predictions in the world. That's in my experience. That's not an ontological commitment that I have, right? I'm not committing to that, necessarily physicalism is true or that I'm not being deceived, but I can still produce results within the experience that's produced to me through a method, right? I don't have to actually assume the ontology. Okay.
Precisely. There has to be.
So I guess I'm not really saying. I don't know if Matt wants to come in and add anything, but I'm not really seeing like what the point of your claim is. Like you're saying, it doesn't require. You're saying science doesn't require methodological naturalism. That's the claim.
I mean, in order to get systematic, in order to collect evidence in a systematic.
Yeah. So what's an alternative? So what would be the alternative?
I think the more parsimonious position would be that you just need to find robust empirical relations between certain observable phenomena that we see, and construct scientific theories to fit the data to. And construct scientific theories to fit the data to the evidence, and it's like what you said, to test and to falsify those theories and to elaborate it based upon what the world based upon. Yeah.
Dean, when you're going through and you're listing the potential explanations for something, does science get to include non-natural potential explanations to consider? The answer is no, but largely correct. And that means that science does in fact rely on methodological naturalism, because methodological naturalism is the methodological assumption that we don't get to appeal to the supernatural when looking for explanations. It doesn't mean that individual scientists are sitting around going, as I try to solve this problem and come up with a model, I need to stay within the bounds of methodological naturalism. No, it just means that we don't get to appeal to the supernatural. That's all methodological naturalism means, and it is the cornerstone of science. So your position is wrong by your own admission.
Obviously, if you have like a stereotypical view of a god that has infinite power and acts by fiat, obviously.
No, sir, Dean. Dean, stop talking, because you've now been backed into a corner where you proved yourself wrong. And when I pointed it out, what did you say? Well, if you're talking about a stereotypical God with blah, blah, blah. No, sir. You just went to something completely irrelevant. Whether you're talking about a stereotypical God, a non-stereotypical God, a God that's omnipotent, a God that's not, none of that has anything at all to do with the discussion that we just had about science and methodological naturalism. You have a defense mechanism in your brain so that when you are proven wrong, you spew forth something completely irrelevant as a distraction, so that your brain doesn't have to face the fact that it's wrong. That's what you just did.
Wrong.
Yes. You proved yourself wrong.
Okay.
Cool.
I guess my sort of position is that there is no way to distinguish between natural and phenomenon and supernatural phenomenon. No, Dean. Dean,
you don't get to do that. You don't get to call in to talk about naturalism, and then when asked if science gets to appeal to the supernatural, you don't get to then, once you've been proven wrong and proven yourself wrong, get to claim that there's no difference between the natural and the supernatural, because now you sound absolutely asinine. Is there no difference between what's true and what's not true? Because that's the level that you're denying now when you say there's no difference between natural and supernatural.
I don't necessarily see that. I'm just
go study. You'll get to it eventually. Thanks. It's frustrating to prove yourself wrong like that. And our brains, not just Dean's, anybody's prone to doing this. You have to work hard to make sure you don't do this, which is, they just said something that short circuits. So I'm going to babble incoherently about something that I think sounds important, sounds significant, and isn't actually relevant at all. It is, it's a tough place to be in, especially if you're in public on TV. And it's one of those things I wish all of us need to work better to memorize or to recognize, which is that once you've made a public profession of here's what I believe, the likelihood that you're going to also publicly admit that you have defeated your own argument or that you were wrong is pretty low, because now you have an investment. There's an extra sort of embarrassment.
Which is strange, because it's like, if you think about the alternative, what ends up happening when you realize that, wow, okay, I believe this thing. I had something that I presume justified it. I found out that it doesn't justify it. And then now I change my position to a more defensible position. Like, that's a really good thing. That's something to like celebrate about, in my opinion. And that's how anybody comes to a position where they feel more confident about talking about said position, because they've updated their beliefs to one that's more defensible and easier for them to defend, because they're not pulling it out of their ass live on a show.
Yeah.